Welcome to High Strangeness, where we ask questions and explore all that is strange and unexpected in our reality.
Welcome to High Strangeness. I'm Tony, and this is the place where we talk about all things strange and unexpected in our reality. Today's episode falls more into the category of unexpected in our religion and belief series episodes that we're going to be doing. Now, have you ever heard of the name of a religion and immediately had a mental picture and perception of what that might be? Well, you could find yourself completely in the wrong direction in relation to what it really is. So today I'm excited because we're going to be talking about Quakers and Quakerism. And I'm very happy to have Pastor Philip Gulley, who is a Quaker pastor and an author of over 22 books and a regular contributor to essays that are found in the Indianapolis Monthly and the Saturday Evening Post. And so with that, I want to welcome you, Philip, to the show. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm fine, Tony. Thank you for having me on. I've been looking forward to being with you.
Me too. This is great. I love the opportunity to talk with people and to learn about different things. And so this is great, and I love bringing it to people too as well. So you are in Indianapolis, and or just outside of Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. How are things out there today?
Well, today it's cold but sunny. 10 degrees, and tomorrow is going to be 5 degrees. So
whoa.
Be a good day to stay inside next to the wood stove.
For sure. And for everybody's benefit, we're taping right at the middle of February. So if this airs closer to May, nobody will flip out and go, it's really that cold out there? Yeah. So you are a Quaker pastor, and how long have you been a pastor?
Oh, gosh, 40 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
41 years. I started when I was 21.
That's great.
Yeah.
So much experience and wealth of knowledge that you've gotten over those 40 years, I'm sure.
Well, one would think.
Yeah, right. So, are you from Indianapolis?
You know, I grew up in the same town where I still live. I took a 20-year break from here, but then moved back 25 years ago when my parents were aging and needed a bit more help, and our children were young then, our two boys, and so it looked like a good time to move back and be more available to help my parents. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's really great. I love that. I was just talking with one of my daughters the other day, and we were talking about how different segments of society either stay where they grew up or move on. Today, the young people are all over the place.
Right.
And I'm a little younger than you. I'm in my late 50s, but most people, it seems like from my age and up, are they kind of stay closer to where they grew up. Mm-hmm. And the young people like to fly and go all over the place. So
I have two sons. One of them owns a farm about 5 miles from us, and the other lived in Alaska for 5 years and is now in San Antonio, Texas. So
wow, that's a pretty cool extreme.
left the being the child of Quaker pacifists. He joined the Army the day after high school graduation, and is getting his medical degree through the Army. So
wow, that's great.
Couldn't wait, and I tell him, hey, would you like to move back home? Nope. So, and our other son can't bear to leave the county. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, thank your one son for his service. That's wonderful that he's done that. And, you kind of shared that. So you were in that area, you kind of grew up, then you left for a bit and you came back. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of cool. Are you excited to be back?
Oh, yeah. The town has grown a lot, as I know Utah has. In the next 2 years, our little town will double the number of households.
Wow.
So it's growing. I mean, but even after we do that, it's estimated that there will only still be 16,000 people here. So
oh wow,
it's bearable.
It was a small town before. Yeah. That's cool. I think that's really an experience for a community that I think is so missed, because a lot of people are congregating to these busier places and they miss out on some of the wonder and coolness of being in some of those smaller towns.
It is nice. We have a beautiful town square that's lined, surrounded with excellent restaurants. There are music concerts every weekend, shows on the square, and everybody shows up and goes, and it's just wonderful. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, Philip, I'm going to tell you about something funny because we're going to get into Quakers here in just a minute.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't know much about this in my area. Because before I interviewed, I asked a few people, do you know anything about the Quaker faith? And you're going to find this funny. The two answers I got, ready? First one was this. I'm like, no, I don't think so. And then one person said to me, yeah, they're the Amish, right? I said, no, I don't think so.
Well, if it does help, I belong to a motorcycle group that's based out of our Quaker meeting, and our name is the Quaker Outlaws.
I love that. I love that. So this is great, right? This is more the reason why I said, yes, this episode needs to happen. So I really appreciate you spending some time with us today. Let me see here. Have you run across misunderstandings about what the Quakers are?
Oh, sure.
Out there? Have you been out and about?
Oh, sure. Yes. Just last month, a woman phoned me to see if anyone could come to our meeting for worship. And I said, absolutely, anyone's welcome. And she said, and I won't be coming in a horse. Is there a place to park my car? And I said, you can park your car where we park our cars, in the parking lot.
See what I mean?
So yeah, we get that sometimes. The Amish one is probably the more common one.
Yeah.
Because people see pictures of how Quakers looked in the 1700s, that caricature of the simply dressed man and woman, and they just assume that we're still like that, but we're not. There are people with green hair in my congregation.
That's great. I love that.
To attract a number of young goths. So.
Oh boy, that's hilarious. But that's great, right? This is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
There's beliefs, stereotypes, and things that people think they know about, and we're going to help break those or make those straight, right? Help those be more clearly understood. So you have a book. We're going to go into some of that either later or in and out as we talk about different things, and we'll share all that with people as well, so they can pick that up if they want to learn more about the Quaker way. Mm-hmm. So I want to start off with a few basic questions, and then so that others can better understand a little bit about things in the faith, and then we'll just get into all of it and just see where the conversation goes. How does that sound?
Perfect. Okay.
All right. So let's start off with a couple real basics here. Like, Quakers are Christians, right?
Not all Quakers.
Really?
We began as a Christian movement in England in the 1650s, founded by a man named George Fox in northern England. But as it migrated to America, and I would say especially in the past 50 years, that Quakerism began to look radically different than our initial movements. We became much more receptive to other religious experiences, and much more welcoming to people who struggle with faith. And so in my own congregation, for instance, we have several atheists, we have a number of agnostics, and our ethos is that all are welcome, that belief can't be compelled. So we don't insist that people believe a certain thing before joining us. They are simply encouraged to be present with us, and if they decide to embrace Quakerism or assume the label of Christian, that's up to them. So
That is cool. And guess what? I've learned something right there on question number 1.
now, it's also fair to say that if you were to attend some Quaker congregations, that there would be an expectation that you identify as a Christian, believe in the authority of Scripture, and well, those are the two biggies, and embrace such traditional creeds as the divinity of Jesus and all of that. But that isn't true at the congregation I'm involved in, and I would say that's probably not true in probably half of the Quaker meetings in the nation.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's it's very possible that somebody can have different experiences at different congregations. Is that fair to say?
Right. Yeah, from congregation to congregation, and even within a congregation. There are some people in my congregation who are very evangelical, and as I said, there are others who are atheists. And we simply make room for each as long as they make room. Obviously, it's hard to invite someone in community who thinks everybody else is going to hell and
Right.
is determined to make them think the right things. But as long as they're willing to journey with us and kind of meet people where they are, we enjoy having them around. You know?
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I think as we talk, I want to really continue to dive into this because I'm trying to envision in my mind how it all goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll see as we talk and open things up. But I think the next question I have for you is the sacred texts. Are there in the Quaker faith? Do you guys have any sacred texts? Where is it? The Bible? Is it something else? Or what do you guys use?
Well, for some Quakers, it would be the Bible. But historically, Quakers were not people of the book. We believed, and this is probably true of most Quakers today, that the Spirit which gave forth the Scriptures is still active in our world and is present in all people, leading us, teaching us, guiding us. And so it's been said that if the Bible were to disappear tomorrow, we would still have a meaningful religious experience, spiritual experience, because we believe we would still be led by what we call the inward light. And we believe this light is present in all people, and so we don't consider ourselves the spiritual superiors to Jewish people or to Muslims or Hindus or atheists or Buddhists. That they too have the light and presence of God in them, and therefore they have something to teach us.
Interesting. I love that. So and it sounds like different congregations there may be a different spin or feel to this, but there isn't a specific deity that you're looking up to. Is that fair to say? It's more the spirit within and the connection without.
I would say that that the average Quaker probably doesn't distinguish those theological niceties and would just talk about God and more commonly the light. Some have referred to it as the inward teacher. But just that which is at once beyond us and also within us and within all the world.
That's amazing. So there are, different religions out there that are, some are looking to a deity, others are feeling a oneness and a connection with a kind of a eternal spirit or something like that. And it seems like in the Quaker faith that there is room for all of it, really.
Yes,
Would
ideally.
that be? Yeah.
Ideally, yes.
So what would a church service look like if somebody came to, and do you guys meet on Sunday or is there a different day?
Yep.
Okay.
There are two types of religious activity in a Quaker meeting. The first is called, and this is the original mode, unprogrammed meeting for worship, where people gather. There are no clergy. They enter into silence, and as people feel led, they led by the Spirit to speak, they can stand and speak. Sometimes what they have to say is very rich and powerful, and other times you get the sense that they're just either like to hear themselves talk or have a bee in their bonnet about something. And then, largely because of rapid church growth in the years after the American Civil War, when many Americans were returning to the church to try to make sense of the war and what had happened and its aftermath, Quaker meetings began to grow, and they were growing quicker than we could assimilate people into them. It was a time of real growth for a lot of Christian denominations. And so we began to select people within a local congregation who could then teach the newcomers about the Quaker faith. And that model kind of grew and became the norm of in several regions in the country. Indiana, North Carolina, Ohio, Kansas, California, Oregon. It kind of paralleled the westward movement of people in America. So if you were to go to what we call a programmed meeting, you could expect to hear a message. You could expect to sing a song or two. You could expect to hear a prayer. And you could expect silence, especially after the message, so that others who were present then could stand and share their leadings or insights, which sometimes involves disagreeing with what the pastor has said. That is not unusual in a Quaker meeting, and that's allowed because we're not hierarchical. We have no tradition that says that the pastor is somehow wiser or must be obeyed. So anyone can stand and speak and share and disagree.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And we're kind of going there partially, but I'm curious. Continue to share core beliefs of the Quaker faith. And because there's different people out there that, they look and they say, okay, what do they believe?
Mm-hmm.
So how would you describe that for people?
Well, whereas most churches have a creed or a body of beliefs that must be affirmed, Quakers have what we call testimonies. And these are patterns of behavior that we believe are consistent with a spiritual life. So for us, they include the practice of simplicity. So we live simply so that we can share with those who don't have sufficient resources, for one reason. For the second reason, so that we're not distracted by material goods, but can focus on that which claims us, our desire to to be whole and authentic and helpful. So simplicity, and then peace. Most Quakers are pacifists. We don't participate in war, and we do what we can to avoid war and work with governments and nations around the world to, as we say, remove the causes of war. Another testimony is the testimony of integrity. That insofar as we know and are able, we tell the truth. And if we have learned, if we have been dishonest or repeated a lie, then we take steps to amend that, to correct that, and to heal any damage our lives may have caused. We believe also in community, not just community with one another, but global community, that we are part of a whole, and that we always have to act in such a way that helps the world and not just our little corner of it. And the final testimony is that of equality. Because the presence of God or the inward light is in all people, then we can in no way diminish another person because of their gender, their race, their sexual orientation, that all humans are equal, and that we do not, there is not anyone who has moral or political authority over us. We value the beggar on the street as much as we do the president or the king. All are cherished, all are treated with dignity and justice. So we don't have bishops, we don't have a pope, and it's the whole thing is kind of structured so that we don't have people in the local congregation who have authority by virtue of a position.
I see.
If you're in a Quaker meeting and want to have authority, then you must be what we call a weighty friend. That is, your life must give evidence of wholeness and love and compassion and service, and then we listen to you. Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It's interesting to work.
I can see a lot of people liking this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So are there tithes and offerings? A lot of churches do that. Is there anything like that in the Quaker faith, or no?
What friends are encouraged to do is to live simply and be generous. So our religious structures tend to be simple because we don't want to invest a lot of money in buildings and real estate. Those who pastor are paid modestly, and most of us are bivocational. As you've said, I write in addition to pastoring. So the implied understanding then is that when you live simply, that frees up your resources to be generous.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in our meeting, we have probably the bulk of our the money that we collect is immediately turned around and goes outside of the meeting to mostly feed and house people. Right now, we're doing a lot of work with immigrants because they seem to be the scorned class in our culture. And so that's where a lot of our attention is focused right now. Feeding them, clothing them, helping them feel welcomed, helping them find jobs and housing. That's a real passion of ours right now.
That's a great passion. That's a great thing. Yeah. And you're right. These days, that I'm sure there's a huge need.
Oh, yeah.
All over for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. In different faiths, they handle things like the Sabbath or Sunday a certain way. Some religions, what you'll see is people go to church and then they leave and they get back to normal life. Other people take a Sunday and they behave differently on a Sunday for them, or the Sabbath, however. in the Quaker faith, do they do anything specific or different, or do they dedicate something in some way on Sunday?
Well, that's obviously the day we gather together to see one another, to enjoy our company, to learn, to listen, to celebrate. But the Quakers have never been about special days, either special days of the week or religious holidays. We celebrate Christmas, we celebrate Easter, but compared to other denominations, they tend to be understated. We don't get into all the bells and smells. We believe each day is sacred and worthy of our attention. And so
Amazing.
There tends not to be the rigidity often associated with Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty casual. Yeah, cool. The emphasis on every day. Every day is holy. So live in that.
Be the person you're going to be 7 days a week, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. If somebody attends a service, is this typically in the morning, early, or is it later in the day? And how long do they find themselves in a service?
Typically an hour. I've often joked that the Holy Spirit always seems to lead us together for about an hour. But because we don't have a real rigid service, there's some flexibility. If we go over, that's okay. People don't get bent out of shape. Last month we had a fascinating man from Kenya who we knew was going to be in the area, and we knew he was a fourth generation Quaker, and
wow.
And he was here in Indiana for graduate school, and we asked him to come and speak about his perception of America in the age of Trump as a foreigner. And it was fascinating. And so he talked for about a half an hour, and then we asked questions, and before we knew it, an hour and a half had passed, but nobody was chomping at the bit, and so it was very, I guess the best word for it is Quaker worship tends to be unhurried. Unhurried.
Yeah, what it takes to accomplish what you need to do, whatever that is, right? Yeah.
And then when we're done, I sit on what is called the facing bench. It's the bench up front, and someone always sits there with me. And when meeting is over, I will turn to that person and shake their hand, and that is the indication that meeting is over. And everybody else stands and shakes hands, and then we stick around and eat lunch, or we go out to lunch together and continue the morning.
That's cool. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I always wondered, what a service might be like, and that sounds pretty cool. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. You have a Quaker meeting in Utah. There's probably one in Salt Lake City.
I feel like I thought I saw, when I started doing some research to see who to talk with, I think I saw somewhere in Utah that they have one. Yeah.
Your listeners can go to Quaker.org, and there will be a list there of all the Quaker meetings in America.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. So there you go, people. If you want to try it and visit with them, now you know how to find those locations. Thank you for sharing that. Phil, when we were talking a little earlier, you kind of dove a little bit into kind of the historical origin, a little bit of the religion. Could you spend a few minutes there with just a little bit for people to share, like where it came from and just how it's maybe evolved over the years?
England in the mid-1600s, on the heels of the English Civil War, which was, for the most part, a war about religion. So for the first time in England's history, there was an opportunity to be something other than the state church, other than the Church of England. So you saw then during that period a growth of a lot of different religious movements, most of which didn't make it. They kind of flared up and then they died. Quakerism, and I don't know why, but persisted. I think it lasted because shortly after it began in England, it there was this new country, a new world that needed to be populated, and one of the drivers of that, of course, was um, religious persecution, trying to avoid it, or religious authority and trying to establish it. And so you saw a bunch of people moving to America either to establish a religion and become a power or to flee persecution that they were experiencing in England. And the Quakers came to escape persecution. Um, when the Church of England came back into power, Quakers were imprisoned. Uh, we had the good fortune of that one of our early Quakers was William Penn, who came from a very wealthy English family. The King of England owed his father a large sum of money he couldn't pay, and so he gave William Penn, for payment of that debt, gave him something that wasn't his to give. That is the land of Pennsylvania.
Right.
So Quakers just flocked there, and um, that began the movement, and probably is what kept Quakerism a viable religion, because there was a new land, at least new one that hadn't been settled by Europeans yet, and we were welcomed there. And from what I understand in my discussions with um, Quaker historians, didn't have a lot of the issues that others did, because when we came here and discovered that it wasn't ours to own, that there were other people here, we met with them, we drew up treaties with them that were honored, and we paid for the land that we used, and lived often alongside these native communities. That lasted about 2 generations. And then by then, most of the people moving to Pennsylvania weren't Quakers, and Pennsylvania slowly went the way that the other colonies did. And that was just a pattern of conquest and an unwillingness to share any resources, including land. So
Interesting. Yeah. So between the years, let's say 1800s and 1900s,
mhm.
uh, how did things change, evolve, or what was going on with Quaker faith?
Well, that was really an interesting sociological period for Friends, because like uh, most religions after a while kind of lose their initial creativity and energy, and they focus then on preserving the faith. Preserving the faith. Catholics do this, Muslims do it, Jewish people do it, we all do it. And so we entered into what has been referred to historically as a period of quietism. And we drew into ourselves and began imposing some very strict rules around conduct. For instance, if you were a Quaker and you married a non-Quaker, you were what we call read out of meeting. You were made to leave the meeting. If you participated in war, in the Civil War, for instance, you were read out of meeting. There were strict dress codes. There were rules about having instruments in your house. Pianos, flutes were forbidden. It was seen as worldly.
Wow.
And so during that period, and I would say that constituted the first 60 years of the 1800s, we lost roughly half of the Quakers in America, and we did it to ourselves. Um, and then we were helped, ironically enough, by the Civil War and the revivalism that followed that period. And then after that, that whole era of Quakerism just disappeared. It went away. And now when you engage Quakers about that, they look back on that with some embarrassment. But if you talk with people and they say, I had an ancestor who was a Quaker, my family used to be Quaker, you can almost bet that their family member was asked to leave during the first half of the 1800s. And it was really tragic. Uh,
Yeah.
but again, it's a common sociological phenomena based in a desire for purity, spiritual and theological purity, and it never ends well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
A version of excommunication, really.
A version of excommunication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so in more recent years, like let's say in the last 50 or so years, have you seen increases in Quaker faith attendance, membership? What have you guys
It
seen?
depends. If you are a Quaker in South America or Kenya, you are part of a growing, rapidly growing Quaker community. Um, the Quaker congregations in those areas are just exploding in growth. And that's been the case for the past 30 years. There are now more Quakers in Kenya than anywhere else.
Wow.
If you're a member of a program meeting in America, that is, if your congregation has a pastor, the chances are good you are not a growing congregation. If you're an unprogrammed meeting, that is, if you don't have a pastor and you gather on the basis of silence, you're holding your own. You might even be growing.
Interesting.
There's a fascinating website. It's called beliefnet.com. And you can go on there and you can take a test, answer a series of questions about yourself and your religious preferences to discern what church you should join or what religion you should be. And 72% of the respondents in that who take that test are told they should be Quakers. So
Wow.
culturally, socially, what we discover is that a lot of people are intrigued by what we represent.
Yeah.
Now, the question is, how do we get them into our meetings? Because we tend not to evangelize.
Right.
And we can't, there's no stick we can hold over your head and say, if you don't come be with us, then you're going to hell, since most Quakers don't believe in hell.
Yeah.
So all the impetus there, the most we can do is we can say to people, oh, you'd be most welcome among us.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And if they say, well, what happens if I don't? Our typical response is, your life will still be pretty good.
Yeah. I hear you. It's almost like it's really a place where people that are looking and, they're not afraid to check some things out. And then they go, you know what, let me visit. Let me see what this is like. And then they find out that this is a good place for them. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. So I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it just in case. It doesn't sound like there are any specific rituals or ceremonies or anything like that related to the Quaker faith and belief system.
Yeah.
Is that true?
That's largely true. Although I argue that silence is a ritual. And that's certainly something consistent with 95% of the Quaker meetings out there. But no, we don't practice outward sacraments. So we don't do water baptism. We don't do bread and wine communion. Although we believe in baptism and we believe in communion, we just believe those are inward realities, that before one is sprinkled in water, they should have what we call an inward baptism, where we have been, where we have experienced a rejuvenation, a rebirth, so to speak.
Yeah.
And if we've experienced that inward baptism, then the outward baptism is unnecessary.
Interesting.
As for communion, we believe our communion is when we sit in silence and relate with one another and with the Spirit who lives in us all.
Yeah.
But
Very cool.
that's how we partake of the presence of God.
Yeah.
Not by what we eat, but by how we sit together and discern together and visit together.
You had mentioned, I've heard you say the word friends, and I think I've heard that, read that somewhere else. Is that a common name for the Quakers? Is that part of that? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Religious Society of Friends.
Okay, that's right.
That is typically our official names. If we have an official name, the other name, of course, is Quakers, which was a slur at first when our founder George Fox was hauled before a court, and the judge said, who didn't care for Quakers, he said, "Look at you standing before me, quaking, as if in fear of the Lord." And Fox's famous reply was, "If you had any sense, you would quake too." And for his remarks was thrown in prison for a year.
He put him in his place, but he had to take a year. Yeah.
Put him in his place, then got put in a place.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, so as we've been talking, I know it seems very clear that those of the Quaker faith, they participate in community. They help. They're involved to make things better for people. Is it? Do you see a Quaker person taking social positions, maybe mayors, maybe? Do they do anything like that, or is it more just interacting at the grassroots with communities?
Well, there have been 2 Quaker presidents. I would say the more typical Quaker president was Herbert Hoover, who came on the global scene in the 1920s, well, in the years immediately following the First World War, when he, after the government seemed unable to or uninterested in doing it, launched a private initiative to feed the starving citizens of Belgium. And then the Quakers joined in that work and did the same in Germany and the other Axis countries after World War II. Axis and allies. They also worked in Russia, feeding those who had been left devastated by the war. So Herbert Hoover was very much an admired man, elected to the presidency, and then had the misfortune of having a depression hit. For as bright as Herbert Hoover was, and he was a brilliant man, he failed to understand the severity of the depression and did not address it in a timely manner, and was paid for that by not being elected to a second term. The other Quaker president was Richard Nixon. And
really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
He grew up in a very devout Quaker home in Whittier, California. His mother was from Indiana. In fact, some of her descendants and far-flung relations attend the meeting I pastor, the Millhouse.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. We often don't mention Richard Nixon when we talk about Quakers because of his embarrassing end, but he was a lifelong Quaker.
Wow.
And
Did not know that.
it's clear that he had some mental issues about paranoia and some other things going on, which probably serves to illustrate the risk of great power.
Yes.
And we're certainly seeing that now in our nation, when those who have somehow gained power, either through wealth or political position, often end up abusing that power.
Yeah.
But no, like in my meeting, we have county commissioners, we have judges. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Indiana was a member of our Quaker meeting until his death. The mayor of Indianapolis is a frequent visitor in our Quaker meeting. So,
That's really cool.
yeah.
That's really neat. And good to know. Yeah, you never know, like, where people are coming from, and so this is the whole point, right? Like, you find out that somebody's got the Quaker faith, that they're part of that, and then you get a little better feel for how they approach life and the way they look at things. And I think that's awesome. Yeah.
I would say I'm always surprised to learn who are Quakers. The recent governor of Colorado was a Quaker. Hickenlooper,
Really?
I think was his name. I believe now he's a senator or a representative from Colorado. Of course, the one we always like to point out, the two we like to point out are James Taylor and Joan Baez. So Bonnie Wright grew up in a Quaker family. We seem to attract a lot of artists and musicians for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Quaker religion, how do they approach and look at morality and ethical issues? Like, do they hold a position on those sorts of things, or are they very accepting of all sorts of things?
Big believers in the golden rule.
Okay.
If you don't want it done to you, don't do it to someone else.
Good rule.
Good rule. We tend not to get worked up about things that other religions might. If you're gay, we don't look at that as a sin. We look at that as a natural reality that encompasses a good percentage of the world's population. And so for us, it's not the only ethical standard that we have in that is that they too treat others as they would want to be treated. But we perform gay marriages. We do not ostracize them. We feel the same way about persons who are transsexual. That we trust that they are doing their best to be whole and authentic and gracious and compassionate. And that is our primary concern. So you don't see us sitting around worrying about people dancing or playing cards. It's just not within the sphere of our concern.
Yeah.
We care about how you treat people.
Very good.
Yeah.
I think people hearing that and learning that and knowing that better they're going to love that.
Right.
About the Quaker faith. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any misconceptions about the Quaker faith that you're aware of?
Well,
that you go, people need to know this.
Oh, yes. What we initially mentioned, the idea that we are closet Amish. I'd say that. And I would say another big one is that people who aren't Quakers often think they can't come to a Quaker meeting. And I don't know how that started. It's a misconception and might be born out of our thoughts about what if you're an Amish? If you're an Amish, you can't go to an Amish church, but you can. I've been, and I was warmly welcomed, and they were delighted I was there and treated me wonderfully, invited me to stay for the meal afterwards, and were absolutely thrilled I was there. But going into it, I had mentioned it to somebody that I was going to go to an Amish church service. And they said, oh, they'll throw you out. So there was the perception, but it was a misperception. I was warmly
Wow.
welcomed. Yeah.
See, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Quaker view on science and healthcare and things like that, I ask because there are some religions that don't believe in certain things, like maybe blood transfusions, stuff like that. What's the Quaker view on science and healthcare?
Oh, we
Those
love
sorts of
it.
things.
A lot of early friends, I'd say within the first 100 years of our founding, were in the scientific community. Uh, we have always attracted people who have an intellectual bent. We have a lot of teachers in our congregations, researchers, engineers, scientists, writers, um, big into reading. We love that. Doctors, people in the medical field. We believe almost universally that healthcare is a human right that should be granted to all and not just those who can afford it. That
Yeah.
is a mark of our dignity as humans, and so that is something that we're very much involved in and passionate about. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you never know. These are sciences and things that are available for people, and I think people just want to know, like,
Oh yeah.
I wonder what they think about
Yeah,
that.
we look at it as a gift to know more about ourselves and about the order and world in which we live is a gift.
Yeah.
So be grateful for it and expand it. That's one of our things too. Expand the base of human knowledge. That's our duty. Yeah.
Love that. Shifting in a different direction here, I think you've kind of mentioned that there aren't any specific holidays, festivals, things like that celebrated beyond kind of what society does already,
Right.
and that your approach to society's holidays and things like that, or what's the word I'm looking for? That it's okay to participate, but it's not overdrawn. It's not, you don't make a big deal about those things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
No long Lent, no long Easter season. We'll give a tip of the hat to Christmas and Easter, but we really don't get into it that much.
Yeah. Cool.
Which is great when you're a pastor because it eliminates an awful lot of work.
Right.
All my Methodist friends are going nuts during that time.
Right?
Oh,
Yeah, exactly. It's a super busy time for some of them. I know. Yeah. Okay, so this is, we're on High Strangeness podcast, so I have to get one of these weird, kind of crazy questions that are interesting, right? And that is the Quakers' view on UFOs and life outside of the Earth. Any opinions on any of that?
Well, Quakers have always been inquisitive. And I was talking about this with a Quaker just the other day, who said to me, remember when we were growing up, when we were kids, and we were about the same age, this guy and I, how the weird kids in your classes always talked about people from other places other than the earth, and everyone thought they were weird. And I said, oh, I remember that. He said, now you know what's weird? After everything we've learned from the Hubble and Webb telescopes about how expansive the universe is, the possibility of parallel universes, of the universe expanding away from us at what? 1,000,000 miles an hour?
Yeah.
How arrogant to think that we are it. that we are the only intelligent life out there, and even the arrogance in thinking that we are the only race who God might be interested in.
Yeah.
Because when you look at Earth, I mean, we're just a pimple.
We are, right?
We are.
That
So,
little dot out there.
so
Yeah.
it turns out that the nerds in high school who we thought were weird knew something we didn't.
Yeah.
And that our conceit of thinking that we're the only thing, that we're the only ones, is pretty arrogant.
Yeah.
And I think it's reflected in the kind of nationalism we're seeing today, when all that seems to matter to too many Americans is America. So we can deal casually with the people who are suffering in Ukraine. We can be dismissive of the hurt and pain in Gaza and threaten to take it over and move the Palestinians out. What hubris that is. But it's of the same kind of hubris that when I was a kid insisted that we were it. We were the primary beings. And now we're doing that as a nation. We're it. So we should get our say.
The Quaker faith then is open to all these things. Think wider, think bigger.
Most Quakers I know are very curious about that. Very curious. Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. I talked about it, as I talk about this issue with other Christians. I remember having a conversation with a Baptist neighbor of mine, and he said, "Well, I don't believe in it." And I said, "Why don't you believe that there might be life beyond this planet?" He said, "Well, because if there were, the Bible would tell us." And I said, "Does the Bible mention the car, the automobile, the radio?" And here they are.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So most Quakers, because we tend to be curious, would be very open to that.
Yeah.
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 Hey, I know Quakers, and I'm one of them, who believe trees talk to one another.
Trees.
The trees communicate.
Interesting.
And now we discover that the world's largest organism is acres and acres of aspen trees in Colorado, whose roots are all interconnected, who signal one another, so that when one tree is dying, the other trees send nutrients to it to nourish it.
I remember seeing that.
But people are saying that humans are the only intelligent species. I think the more we learn, the more amazed we are. Yeah.
Yes. I think that's very true.
Yeah.
Very true. Well, we've talked a bit here, and I love it. Lots of good stuff. Your book, I think we've weaved in and out of some of this stuff.
Sure.
Would you agree? I mean, you've got a number of different sections or chapters, and one of them was what is a Quaker. I think we've covered some of those things. The discovering your inner Quaker. I think you've talked about the connection, right? With do you call them the maker? Is that what you, or not the maker? It was what was the inner connection with light. God? The inward light. That was it. Yeah.
The inward teacher.
Yeah. The 30 days of application. This is a section in your book, right? Which, by the way, it's called the Living the Quaker Way for people who want to pick up the book. 30 days of application. What does that refer to?
Well, that refers to a religious practice that Quakers have that we call queries. A query is a question. So these queries are designed to cause us to reflect on our own condition, not on what someone else is doing, but on what we're doing and how we're living, so that it's very self-directive and oriented. And so we believe that the regular reflection on those kinds of questions um, are beneficial. Are beneficial. They aren't done in an effort to convert someone else. They're done in an effort to become more aware of our own motives and activities, and to make sure they're consistent with the testimonies we value: simplicity, peace, integrity, community, and equality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Neat. Love that. I've had a bunch of questions I've asked. Is there anything that you'd like to cover that maybe is a good or important part that we didn't weave in and out of the book on? Anything you'd like to share with people in general?
A lot of focus of my work today, in this slice of time that we're inhabiting, is trying to interpret and deal with our political chaos now in North America, and what I believe to be a faithful response to that. So I'm doing that not through my typical publisher, which has mostly been HarperCollins, but through Substack, where I write. And the name of my community on there is Plain Speech. That's a Quaker phrase, plain speech. Speech that is direct and as honest as we can be. Plain Speech by Philip Gulley on Substack. And so that's my effort to kind of make sense of what's happening now.
Yeah.
And from a Quaker perspective. Yeah.
Love that. Okay. So there you go, people. Any other books you're working on? Anything like that in the near future?
You know, I had written a book called If Grace is True, then another one, If God is Love, and then a third one, If the Church Were Christian. With the advent of Donald Trump and his motto, Make America Great Again, I wrote a book called If America Were Great, Our Common Quest for a More Perfect Union. I took that book to my publisher at HarperCollins, and they declined to publish it, saying it was no longer consistent with their publishing ethos. And of course, they're owned by Rupert Murdoch, who also owns Fox News.
Right.
So I thought, well, I'll just do this on Substack.
Substack, yeah.
And
that's right. It's there. Why not, right?
I don't have anybody saying to me, you can't say that, or that will alienate all the people who voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I don't write for the express purpose of alienating people who support Donald Trump, but neither will I ignore the things that are happening.
Yeah, you're speaking the truth that you see from your Quaker's perspective.
Right.
And you should. You should be able to do that. Exactly. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so Substack now allows me to do that. I didn't have to pass any kind of litmus test to get on there. And I've never been good at litmus tests anyway.
I love that. Well, look, this has been great. I've learned like a lot here. And thank you for sharing your thoughts and views on these things. Now, if you can share again, if somebody wants to find a congregation or a meeting house anywhere here in the United States, you had provided earlier a link. What was that again?
Quaker.org.
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 Awesome.
And there'll be they can find a button in there that'll show them a directory of all the meetings in America.
That's great.
Yeah.
And we know that people can get your book, The Quaker Way, right?
Living the Quaker Way.
Living the Quaker Way, to get more information. Is there other places that people can get more information on the Quaker faith?
Well, I would say a good place is just to go on Google and enter Quaker forums. because all kinds of Quakers run all kinds of forums where people can write in and ask questions, and they're,
wow.
they're a
Okay.
marvelous resource. And since
That's-
we lack a hierarchy, there isn't one that's approved by the religion because we don't have anyone to approve it or disapprove it. So what we have are passionate Quakers, all of whom make themselves available to answer any questions that someone might have. Yeah,
That's great. Yeah. They can just ask their own question.
that's
I
right.
love that.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, Philip, this has been great. Thank you
Well,
so
thank you.
much.
Thank you for having
I
me
really
on, Tony.
appreciate it. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing, and this has been a great conversation, and I've really learned a lot. And so I want to tell everybody out there, there you go, the Quaker way. Now you know a little more than maybe you knew before. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Philip, for being with us as well. And as we wrap up, just as a reminder, and not pointing to our episode here, but just I always say this at the end of my episodes, which is remember, there's a lot of strange and unexpected in our reality. Always keep your eyes, ears, and minds open. And until next time, stay safe. See ya.
Thank you for listening to High Strangeness. This was a glance at some of the strange that exists in our reality.